Greetings everyone, Slurgical here, and now it's painting streets and alleys. Before going into the painting, let's talk about the three ways to print the same tiles. Looking at those three tiles, you think they're really different, but they're exactly the same tile, but printed differently. All three of them are printed on an FDM printer, and on the top of that, they're all printed in draft mode, so it's not the quality of your setting of your printer. It all has to do with the angle of printing. So this one on the left is printed at 45 degrees, while the one on the right was printed at 90 degrees. And this one is printed flat on the print bed. At 45 degrees, you can see the layer lines, but they're not as pronounced as when they're printed flat. And underneath it is the one printed straight up at 90 degrees, and you can see the difference in the layer lines. The printer will also make a big difference, except for if it's printed flat. Flat is pretty much going to be the worst in surface quality, no matter what your printer is. The filament color and brand makes also a huge difference. For example, matte black has beautiful results, and the quality of the print is crispier and smoother at the same time. Both those tiles have been printed at 90 degrees, and if you notice the black one, the matte black has a curve. It lifted, even though that I had the brim around it. The printer is enclosed as well, so technically this shouldn't happen. To resolve that issue, I can increase the bed temperature and maybe play around with other settings of the printer. This will vary with your printer, your room temperature, the humidity level of the room, if there's any draft. There's so many different things that can affect that, including how old is your filament and how humid or wet your filament is from the moisture from the air. Two factors to consider if you're printing at 45 degrees or 90 degrees for your tile. It's going to be the cleaning you're going to have to do at the end. You see the edge there, all that mess, and in between the bricks there's those little squiggly things. That's just because there's no support on that spot, but that's okay, because in the tile and in the streets dirty, and you can finish this and paint those little whatnots in between, like with dirt and grime, and paint in the color of vines or grass and stuff coming out. It's really beautiful when you print at 90 degrees. The rest of the tiles, see how smooth it is. It looks like real cobblestone compared to this, which is, they're staggering. It almost looks like wood for the middle part. Cleaning those tiles will take a lot of work, unfortunately. There's a price to pay for how the smoothness you want. I use a box cutter like this, and be really careful and safe. There's also that edge there that's really cool. If you scrape the edge, depending on the blade like that, it will strip the little extra stuff. But for big chunks like that, I have to use the blade completely. I can't use the side. Now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of that video. Let's paint and finish those tiles so we can have a playable surface that looks realistic, or as realistic as it can be. We're going to start that process by priming all the tiles. For priming it, I'm going to mix Mod Podge with acrylic regular paint and a hummus box. There's no hummus, unfortunately, but it was really good and tasty before I finished. And don't forget the foam brush. It's really useful. I don't think there's really an exact recipe on how much you must mix this with that. You go with the feel and how it's going to be easier to brush on. The really important thing to remember is that you have to mix it evenly, so there's no portion that has more Mod Podge or more paint or more. Oh, there wasn't any more of more. Once your mixture is done, you're ready to paint. And we'll see the difference it's going to make at the end, whether you printed those tiles flat or 45 degrees or 90 degrees. I think overall it may be fine even if you did it flat, because there's going to be so much variances in the painting process and the finishing process that it will be distracting enough for you not to have those obvious difference jumping in your face. Another reason why I print in two different filaments, I want to see what at the end the results when you paint using two different color filament, if it affects the end results. Let's not forget the sewer grate and the well. The well is really straightforward, but the sewer grate is interesting because while you paint, you're going to see it's going to make it's going to close up some of those holes, and leave them like that. Don't pop those paint in between those holes because it just adds some variety and interest to the piece. Once all the priming is done, let's start painting all the tiles. I'll be painting them in this gray. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible to try to achieve the most as I can. Because of course I can paint all of those individually and separately. Well, maybe not individually, but randomness in different colors. But let's just do it gray and we'll see what we can do after they are all painted with doing some washes and other effects. Applying the washes is the really interesting part because now that all the tiles are painted and you're going to see a little bit of differences now. There's going to be some baseline black because I use different filament colors. There's nothing special about the wash. It's the same wash that Jeremy from Black Magic Craft has promoted, and pretty much everybody uses that, and it's great. I was a bit off camera, so you just splotch everything like in other videos. The important part is that you have to start dabbing before it dries, and the clumsier you are, the more entertaining for others it will be, but not so much for yourself. And I'm just going to be doing that with every single tiles. I'll be trying from right side to left side to all over my hands. While it's still a bit damp from before, I'm going to do another round of dabbing, and if there's a spot that I miss, I can always add much more. And the sponge or the paper towel that you use will retain some of the wash, so it will add some more effects. And since all the tiles are the same, doing these washes and all that finishing will eventually give more individuality to each of the tiles. And don't forget to sponge everything. For example, for the gray, the color, after I did the initial priming, I dabbed everything. If you brush on, the layer line are going to show for sure. But you can initially brush on, and then once you brush on, you go everything with your paintbrush and dab, and then you do pretty much the same thing with the washes. You brush it on, and after that you dab it, and the randomness will make the same. Let's say you printed 20 tiles, all those 20 tiles will really look different. For extra effect and more depth, use another wash. You can use as many washes as you want, different colors, different tones, but in this case I'm using an orange one, and for some reason it looks really yellow. But that's okay, it's dirt and grime in the tile, and this one is really wet. It's basically dirty wash water that I decided to convert into a wash, like paintbrush water. And it's okay. It will dry, and it looks a bit of a strong color right now, but once it dries, it's just gonna give like an under hue to the whole thing. Well, I'm hoping anyway. We'll see how it ends up, because it's kind of a first time I do this. And don't be afraid to give it. The goal is I'm not gonna put it on the upper tiles for the sidewalks. I'm just doing that in the middle, and it's to just give an impression of all the dirts collect on there because it's a lower surface. And if you go overboard like this and you go on the sidewalk tiles, it's okay. You can dry it out or shove it off the side so it doesn't appear or shown at the end once it dries. The original Italian cobblestones were rounded river rocks placed in plazas to discourage horses from crossing them. Eventually they were used for streets and were great for horses. The streets were no longer muddy or filled with refuse, garbage, and manure. This prevented the spread of diseases to the humans and helped the horses that pulled wagons without wheels getting bogged down in the mud. As an added bonus, the streets were easier to clean. In England, the citizens even tried to build roads with wood, but that was disastrous once the wood became waterlogged and they exploded. In coastal America, cobblestone streets were actual Belgian block streets or paverstone streets. Belgian blocks were used as ballast for sailing ships. If the ship was not to return to Europe, their ballast were recycled in port cities for cobblestone streets. Well, thank you very much for watching this video and being part of my journey, and I wish you the best in your journey, and See you on next video.